Forms of language and change. Now we move on to another topic, which is talking about how does language trigger change? How does change trigger language change itself? And we talk about in this language change, what is the role of the individuals? What are the dynamics of language change? Under what circumstances do languages change? Under what circumstances languages do not change to that extent? So this tells us if, for instance, you are passionate about your own regional language or your certain language that you would like to sort of keep on to. So it gives you some sort of basic idea about what affects it and how can change be dealt with. And change, by the way, is not a bad thing. So the whole thing is that it is about how can you make your language responsive. So over here also, when we talk about language change, there are different sort of views on it. There are people who would like to retain the same structure or same vocabulary of the language, while there are others who would sort of like be more responsive to the change. Let me give you one example. For instance, this table. Now, in several texts of Urdu, you come across table as an Urdu word. Table par rakh do. School is an Urdu word, and yet it is an English word, and it is used in Urdu text so much that it has become an Urdu word also. We call such words cognates. In any case, this is just a small example of how over the time change comes to be imbibed in a language in such a way that it becomes a part of the language itself. So we want to know about the dynamics of language change. We also want to know the role of individuals in that change. We would like to know the role of the society in that change. How is change triggered? Is it what type of interactions between society and individuals can bring about that change or do bring about a change that you might not approve of? Within the society, you have families, you have institutions, you have religions, several customs, several traditions. We will look into those dynamics and how do they affect change. When they affect change, that means they also are relevant to bilingualism in two main ways. A, they change the ecology of within which the languages coexist. So within a bilingual society, you can see which languages are pushed aside and which languages take center stage and how does it come to be. And the second way that we are talking about change is in the change of the language itself. So it is the dynamics that we are talking about. We will also talk about what are the developmental aspects of language behavior and how do children actually develop certain kinds of language behavior that somehow spreads to the society. So from the psychological, we move on to linguistic and to the functional, but we also move on to the wider social aspects. Now, just an example of how the change over time has occurred. For instance, there is this instance of Faiz Ahmad Faiz, who went to stay with a long-time friend of his in the 70s. And this was gradually a time when Urdu was losing its status to English language. and his friend's son came up to him and asked for his autograph. And when Faiz Ahmed Faiz signed the autograph, the child looked at him in surprise and said, "Well, my dad told me that you had excellent English. Then why are you using this Khansama language?" Now, this concept of Urdu, around which we somehow all gathered together to make Pakistan, which was a galvanizing force in the making of Pakistan, which also triggered certain language riots at that time, immediately after Pakistan was made. And the whole issue was about Urdu being made the language or the national language of Pakistan. You can see how come that it lost its status to English language. And did it have to do with the emerging private school sector? All these things come into these.